Hello everyone, and welcome to my B&B Fan Club channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Hope sat at the window of the private jet, the soft hum of the engines providing a soothing background to what was supposed to be a celebratory journey. It had been months of turmoil, heartbreak, reconciliation, and now a new beginning. Liam, beside her, looked out at the clouds that were narrowing beneath them, his expression thoughtful. Little Beth dozed quietly in the back seat, wrapped in a blanket, her curly hair gently rising and falling with each breath. The plan had been simple. A short overnight flight to Europe, a few days of relaxation, and a chance for the family to reconnect and bond away from the dramas of Los Angeles. Hope gave Liam a gentle smile. "Hard to believe it's finally happening," she said softly. "Just the three of us away from everything." The glint in her eyes told the story of someone who had been through a lot and was now looking for peace. Liam reached out, grabbed her hand and squeezed it. "Exactly," he responded. "You, me and Beth. We fought for this. We deserve it." For a while their conversation was light, like when relief settles in after a long storm. Hope mentioned how proud she was of Beth's recent growth, how the little girl was making new friends at school, and how she appeared happier now that the turbulence of the past was over. Liam nodded, his thoughts drifting back to how fragile that peace had been, and how this trip represented his promise to her and Beth that they were creating something real. He turned back to Beth and smiled. "Are you getting some sleep, kiddo?" he stated. Beth stirred, opened her bright eyes, and looked up at them before reaching for her father's hand. He leaned back and offered it, and she wrapped her little fingers around his. The jet dipped slightly, and Hope adjusted her seatbelt. She mentioned that turbulence had already begun, which was to be expected as they crossed the Atlantic. They settled in for the overnight segment. At some point the lights were dimmed. Liam reviewed his notes on his tablet. Despite the fact that this was supposed to be a leisure trip, he had a few business proposals to consider that could not wait. Hope closed her eyes and took deep breaths, savoring the moment. The low drone of the engines, the soft hum of the air conditioning, the plane's gentle motion. For the time being, everything seemed fine. Hours have passed. Beth had awoken and wanted something to drink. Hope passed her some juice. Liam held a coloring book for her, and they talked quietly. Suddenly, the jet bucked violently, causing Hope's heart to skip. The overhead lights flickered. Beth cried out. Liam reached out to comfort her, looking at Hope with wide eyes. "What was that?" he asked. Hope unbuckled her seatbelt and reached for the attendant button, but there was no attendant. This was a small private charter. He unbuckled his belt, stood up and looked around the cabin. The engine growled louder. Outside, dark clouds gathered, and lightning flashed in the distance. Without warning, the plane lurched again, this time with a vengeance that flung books and papers everywhere. Hope grabbed Beth and held her close, while Liam braced himself against the seat in front. The overhead panels glowed orange and red. Something outside rumbled. Liam yelled, "Brace!" He did his best to pull Hope and Beth down. The world outside their window appeared to tilt unnaturally, as if the craft were falling sideways. Something collided with the jet, causing a tremendous crash. The interior shook violently. Hope screamed while shielding Beth. Liam shouted her name. As the oxygen masks dropped, the cabin lights dimmed. Liquid spilled. The plane went into a dive. For a brief moment everything seemed suspended, the fear, the weight, the motion, but then it was gone. They awoke to darkness, dust, and displacement. Hope's vision was blurry, and she felt a metallic taste in her mouth and a tightness in her chest. She attempted to sit up. The seat in front was twisted, and papers hung in the air like tattered curtains. Liam was nearby, his brow trimmed and his shirt stained. Beth remained in her father's arms, crying softly. Hope trembled and reached for her daughter, saying, "Beth, I'm here. I'm here." Liam leaned over to check on them both. "Are you okay?" he whispered to Hope, his voice quivering. Hope forced a nod, but the pain in her ribs indicated it wasn't just shock. "What happened?" "We crashed," she managed. Liam looked around to assess the damage. Outside they heard hissing, possibly from fuel leaking or wind passing through a breach. The emergency lights flickered. The cabin was tilted and leaking fluid, with faint smoke seeping in. They needed to get out. Liam assisted Beth onto both of their laps. Okay, he said. We should get off this plane. Stay with me. He stood, wincing and clutching Beth close. Hope stood there, clutching her daughter. They made their way down the aisle, stepping over debris and shattered panels. The door exit was jammed, so Liam yanked it open with effort. They finally stepped into the night air. And it was a cold shock. Rain fell. Lightning flashed. The aircraft's wing was broken, and the engine was silent. They were stranded in an unfamiliar location, somewhere along the open coast, with the ocean below and no clear ground visible. Hope cradled Beth against her chest. Liam stood next to her, scanning the darkness. We survived, she said quietly. And despite her trembling voice, she meant what she said. They didn't know how, but they knew they were alive. They stumbled away from the wreckage, rain pelting their faces and wind gusting. Liam carried Beth in one arm while Hope held his hand in the other. The terrain was rough, broken rocks, water spray, and darkness. They could feel panic rising. Had anyone else survived? Was help on the way? They didn't know exactly where they were. Liam shone his phone light but received no signal. They had to move toward what appeared to be a clearing near the cliff's edge, with the sound of waves crashing below. Hope breathed deeply for both of them. She said softly to Beth, "You're safe, sweetie. Daddy and I are right here." Beth sniffled and nodded, pressing into her father's coat. Liam's chest tightened. He had imagined this worst-case scenario before, but not with his little girl in his arms. He looked at Hope, her face pale but determined. They found a somewhat sheltered area beneath overhanging rocks, and collapsed onto jackets discovered in the wreckage. Liam retrieved a first aid kit from the emergency supplies. His forehead cut bled, Hope's ribs were severely bruised, and Beth was cold and shivering. He applied antiseptics and bandages. Hope wrapped the blanket around Beth and herself, huddled close. Hope stated, "We need to stay awake and keep each other together. I will stay with Beth." Liam nodded. "Okay. I'll look for help or a sign of rescue." He looked out into the darkness, the only sounds being wind and waves, and the jagged remains of the plane behind them like a ghost. He moved toward the ridge to see if any lights were visible. Hope watched him leave while holding Beth, and a flood of thoughts washed over her. How fragile life was, how she had taken for granted the next morning's routine. And now this. Nonetheless, she felt strangely calm. They were together, Beth in her arms and Liam by her side, even though they were both broken. That mattered. Time has passed. Liam returned with his phone's light barely reaching far. He claimed to have seen something, perhaps a faint glow in the distance, a lighthouse or a building. Hope sat up and rubbed her rib, wincing. "I saw something, correct?" "Good," Liam said, nodding. "We'll try to arrive in the morning when there is more light. For the time being, we'll take refuge here." He checked their supplies, which included a few water bottles and energy bars. Enough for a while. The night deepened. Beth's shivers subsided as she fell asleep, nestled between her parents. Hope closed her eyes for a few minutes at a time, but never for long. She kept drifting awake, listening for sounds, reassuring Beth and touching Liam's hand. She had a dream about the jet exploding and woke up in a panic, only to realize it was just thunder outside. The gray light of dawn broke through the darkness. The rain had stopped, but the wind remained. The cliff below featured foaming white waves. Liam collected the supplies. He asked Hope if she could walk. She said yes, but slowly. He suggested that they move toward the light he saw, which could be help, shelter, or rescue. Hope agreed. She stood, stretched, and held Beth's free hand. They began the journey. The ground was slippery with sharp rocks. Liam carried Beth for stretches. Then Hope held her while Liam controlled Hope's pace. They discussed everything. How should they inform the children at home? How must they find their way back? What are their jobs? Their home? But those concerns seemed distant now. Survival was the priority. As they ascended toward the ridge, the unstable ground gave way once. Hope stumbled, her breath caught, but Liam caught her and pressed a hand against her ribs. "We've got this," he assured her firmly. His eyes were fierce and protective. They reached the top of the ridge and noticed a faint structure. A building perched on the coastline, possibly a lighthouse or a small station. A light blinked. Relief flowed through them both. Liam called out. Hope also raised her voice. The building responded, and a single silhouette appeared in the window. The horn sounded. The figure used binoculars to scan the cliff. Liam waved his shirt. Eventually, a light turned on and the building's doors opened. They went down. Beth was in Liam's arms, and Hope hesitated only at one steep stretch before taking a cautious step. They came across a man near the building who was rugged, friendly, and dressed in a waterproof jacket. "Are you okay, folks?" he inquired in an unfamiliar accent. "What happened?" Liam explained. "We flew in last night. We need assistance." The man led them inside. The structure turned out to be a maritime rescue station. Warm, dry blankets and hot tea. The man inquired as to whether they had sustained serious injuries. Hope complained about her ribs, and Liam mentioned his head. Beth was cold but otherwise fine. They sat in a small station. The man communicated with his supervisor via radio. "Yes, we have survivors of a private jet crash at approximately coordinates. Sending boat and helicopter." He looked at Hope and Liam. "You will be evacuated shortly. Until then you stay here." Relief washed over them. Hope exhaled. "Thank you," she replied quietly. She looked at Beth, who was asleep in Liam's arms. Liam looked at Hope, relieved. They were safe. Together. After being rescued, they were flown to a coastal hospital for testing. The jet crash had resulted in injuries, but nothing life-threatening beyond a concussion, broken ribs, and shock. They were kept under observation overnight. Hope cradled Beth on her lap, gently stroking her hair. Liam sat by her side, bandages covering his head. They exchanged small smiles. The nurse came in, informed them that the rest of the family had been notified, and that someone would be there to pick them up once they were stable. Hope and Liam sat on the hospital terrace, overlooking the sea on a quiet evening. The sun was setting, leaving the sky orange and pink. Hope leaned her head against Liam's shoulder. "I can't believe how close we came," she said. "It changes things." Liam nodded. "It does." He paused. "I've always loved you." Hope turned to him and said, "I know we've had our ups and downs, but you and Beth are everything to me." Her eyes glistened. "And you are everything to me." She squeezed his hand. "Our trip is no longer just a vacation. It's a watershed moment." They noticed Beth playing with a small toy that the hospital had given her. She laughed freely and innocently. Hope and Liam looked at her for a long time. They both knew that no matter what storms awaited them, this moment, alive, together, and safe, would always be one of the most precious. When they returned to Los Angeles, the story of the crash dominated the media for a day or two. But for Hope and Liam, what anyone said was far less important than how they felt on the inside. They arranged for Beth to return to school, Hope to resume her work, and Liam to take a leave of absence to recuperate and spend time. In private, they shifted their priorities. They revived little traditions like family dinners, bedtime stories, and weekend outings. They discussed the event openly, not to relive the terror, but to recognize the gift of survival. Hope occasionally awoke in the night, remembering the falling plane, the fear, Liam's grip on her hand, and the thunder of impact. She'd reach over to Liam and feel his steady breathing, and she would express gratitude. Liam too had changed. He learned that business deals, deadlines, and ambition pale in comparison to your child's heartbeat and your partner's hand. He promised himself and Hope that he would never take for granted a morning together. He would demonstrate to Beth through his actions, more presence, less distraction. He would nurture the tested trust and the enduring love. They also agreed on something else. If one of them felt the need to take a break, rest, or simply breathe, they would respect it. Because life had shown them how quickly it can change. On a crisp Saturday morning, the three of them sat in their backyard, Beth eating pancakes under the sunlit sky. Hope observed Liam teaching their daughter how to hold the spatula. She felt satisfied. No jet engines, no turbulence, and no unknown coordinates. Just got home. Just family. It was perfect. Though the memory of the crash, the darkness, and the fear would always be a scar, it also became a symbol for Hope and Liam, representing the moment they realized what was most important. That they had survived not only a plane crash, but also the emotional wreckage of the past. Together they could face the unknown. Their daughter Beth served as a beautiful reminder of why they fought, loved, and stayed. In the years that followed, whenever Beth inquired about the trip to Europe, Hope and Liam would smile. They would say that the journey was nearly over, but it eventually led us home. And they'd tell her how grateful they were for each other, for being alive, and for being able to tuck her into bed without fear every night. Because sometimes the greatest gift is simply getting up to face another day together. The sky over Los Angeles was a perfect, cloudless blue that November morning, making people believe nothing bad could ever happen again. Hope Logan stood at the private terminal gate. Her hand tightly gripped Beth's small fingers. The little girl bounced on her toes, accompanied by her unicorn-shaped backpack. Daddy said we're going to see Big Ben, eat fish and chips, and maybe even visit a real princess castle, Beth exclaimed, her voice echoing across the tarmac. Liam Spencer knelt down to her level, his eyes already glassy, though he tried to hide it with his familiar crooked smile. He had insisted on this trip, on every moment, every memory, since the doctors had finally said the word remission 3 months earlier. The tumor that was supposed to take him away had shrunk and vanished, leaving nothing but a shadow on old scans. He was not going to waste another moment of the life he had been given back. Hope saw him lift Beth into his arms the way he always did, as if she were made of spun sugar and sunlight. Her heart still stuttered when she looked at him, remembering the nights she'd spent pleading with God while he slept restlessly beside her, his hand clutching hers even in dreams. She had promised the universe everything. Her career, her pride, her very soul. If it would only let him stay. "Promise me you'll hold my hand the whole flight," Liam said, kissing Beth's forehead. "Even when you're sleeping." "I promise, Daddy." Beth tightly wrapped her arms around his neck, and Hope could hear him laugh through the lump in his throat. The Spencer jet gleamed white and silver in the sunlight, and the stairs folded down like an invitation. Bill Spencer stood at the bottom, arms crossed, attempting to appear stern but failing miserably. "You sure you don't want me to fly you? I could have Stella whip up those little sandwiches you like, Liam." "Dad, we're good," Liam said with a giggle. "You've got Empire stuff. We'll be back in 10 days. Promise." Bill grabbed his son in a rough hug that said everything two Spencer men would never say aloud. He then took a softer approach to Hope. "Take care of my boy." "Always," she said. They climbed the stairs together, Hope first, then Liam, who carried Beth on his hip. The cabin smelled of lemon polish and fresh coffee. The flight attendant greeted them with warm towels and orange juice in crystal flasks. Beth took the window seat right away, pressing her face against the glass as the engines began to growl softly. Hope sat beside Liam, their fingers intertwining naturally. He raised her hand to his lips. "Hey," he spoke quietly. "Look at us." She did. Really looked. At the man who had risen from the dead, at their daughter who had been taken from them twice, once by fate, once by human cruelty, and at the life they had clawed back from the brink of extinction. "I love you," she said, the words still sounding like miracles on her lips. "I love you more," he said, just as he had every day since waking up in that hospital bed and realizing he wasn't leaving them after all. The plane taxied, accelerated, and lifted. Los Angeles faded beneath them, with Forrester Creations a tiny sparkle in the distance, and the Pacific a sheet of hammered gold. Beth squealed as they broke through the clouds, revealing pure blinding white. They were 2 hours over the Atlantic when it occurred. It began with a sound, a metallic shriek that did not fit into the symphony of engines and air. Then the lights flickered. Once. Twice. The flight attendant's smile froze. Liam's hand tightened around Hope's. "Turbulence?" she inquired, but she knew it wasn't. The captain's voice came through the speakers, calm but strained. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've experienced a mechanical issue. We're going to make an emergency descent. Please remain calm and follow all crew instructions." Beth was crying. Not the dramatic tears of a child denied dessert, but the deep, terrified sobs of someone who knew deep down that the world was tilting wrong. Hope unbuckled and reached for her daughter, pulling her into her lap. Liam was already moving, assisting the attendant with oxygen masks, his face pale but determined. The airplane lurched violently. Bags fell from the overhead bins. Somewhere behind them glass shattered. "Daddy," Beth cried, reaching for him. "I'm here, baby. I'm right here." He slid into the seat across from them, buckled himself in and holding both of their hands. "Remember what we said about being brave? Brave like Mommy when she thought you were going to heaven, Beth exclaimed through tears. Hope's sob was caught in her throat. The plane plummeted what seemed like hundreds of feet in seconds. Masks were deployed. The alarms wailed. There was nothing outside the windows but the black ocean and a distant flicker of lightning. Liam leaned forward and pressed his forehead against both of theirs. Listen to me, he said, his voice unwavering despite everything. Whatever happens, you two are my whole world. You hear me? My whole world. And nothing, not this, not anything changes that. The airplane was shaking more strongly. Something exploded below them. Hope smelled smoke. I was supposed to have more time, Liam said quietly, more to himself than to them. God, I was supposed to watch her graduate. Walk her down the aisle. Grow old with you and complain about our aching knees. Liam. But if this is it. He kissed Beth's head. Then Hope's lips, tasting salt and terror and 15 years of almosts and finallys. This is it, then no, I've never been happier than I am right now. With you both. Right here. The aircraft's nose dropped. Steeply. The ocean rushed up to greet them like a dark promise. Hope clutched Beth to her chest and felt Liam's arms wrap around them, forming a cocoon of warmth in the midst of chaos. She closed her eyes and recalled every moment they'd fought for. The night she'd held his hand as he vomited from chemo. The mornings Beth had crawled into their bed, asking if Daddy was going to heaven today. The day the doctor said, it's gone, and they'd all collapsed in tears on the hospital floor.